Welcome to the Binge-Worthy Writing Podcast,
where we take a look at some of your favorite stories and we discuss what tricks, tips, and techniques make them bingeable.
I'm Jonathan. I'm a published short story author and screenwriter who really enjoys writing TV pilots, several of which have been under consideration by production companies, and I love telling stories.
And I'm Jackie. I'm a story consultant and sensitivity reader for Jonathan's scripts as well as for other writers, and I love talking about stories and how they can help create inclusive spaces for others.
And on this podcast, we discuss how great screenplays create bingeable stories.
We're committed to amplifying more than just the same traditional voices, so we'll be looking at a variety of TV shows, some of which you know and love,
and others you might not but should consider checking out.
Since this is our first season, we thought that we should dedicate this entire season to discussing pilot episodes.
The first episode that sells a TV series and makes the audience want to watch more.
Each of our podcast episodes this season will cover a different element that a TV pilot could use to become a successful bingeable story.
Now that you know what makes us binge-worthy, let's talk about what makes a pilot binge-worthy. And one thing that makes any story bingeable is a cliffhanger.
A cliffhanger is ending the story just before it fully resolves. This is absolutely essential to a pilot because...
Is your brain itching for the end of that sentence? Do you want to know how it ends? That's what makes this technique bingeable.
And it's absolutely essential to a pilot to show your viewers that they need to watch more than just one episode to experience the full story. And to explore this, we'll be looking at select scenes from Netflix's Stranger Things.
As many of you know, Stranger Things was a coming-of-age/horror drama that ran for 5 seasons. It was an original concept not based on any previously existing intellectual property.
So what we'll do now is we'll do a dramatic reading of select scenes from the pilot episode of Stranger Things,
which we'll be doing through fair use for the purposes of educating our audience.
And every time something stands out to one of us, we'll stop the reading and talk about it.
We'll focus on what makes the storytelling stand out as excellent, but sometimes we might discuss the differences between what's written in the pilot and what got filmed. Speaking of which, the script that we tracked down was when this show was entitled Montauk and set on Long Island rather than in Hawkins, so bear that in mind as we read.
And then when we're done, we'll recap our takeaways.
Disclaimer, Jackie and I may make some mistakes about the show's lore, especially since we're discussing an early draft, but really we're here to give our take on just these select scenes and how they set up the pilot's cliffhanger. And we'll also try to keep our comments contained to just the show's pilot episode.
All right, let's get right into it.
To orient our audience, I will be the narrator. We'll have Jackie read for Will Byers. And this is the part of the episode where Will is being hunted by some sort of supernatural force. Also, before we start, we're reading page 12 because this actually contributes to 2 different cliffhangers, one of which is the one at the end of the show, but also it gives us a nice little cliffhanger to end Act 1, and so that's why we're starting here. Montauk, pilot. Written by the Duffer Brothers. Interior, kitchen. Will rips a phone off the kitchen wall, dials 911, but it does not ring, just hums with low-end static.
Hello? Hello?
Will pauses. He hears something on the other line, but not a voice. It is that guttural sound he heard in the forest. The pitch rises and falls, making a series of strange sounds. Words? It is as if the figure, whoever, whatever it is somehow speaking to him through the phone receiver. Behind him, his dog begins to growl at the front door. Will lowers the phone and looks back at the door. A shadow fills the crack at the base of the door, and then somehow, impossibly, the chain bolt begins to slide open, as if drawn by an invisible hand. The metal shrieks. Will drops the phone and... Exterior, Byers' house, night. I'm going to pause there. So, as mentioned, we're reading this, even though it happens about 10 pages in, it's going to set up a nice cliffhanger for the end of Act 1. But, so what we're doing here is we're actually building suspense. And it's hard to talk about a cliffhanger without talking about how to build suspense. And so, one thing, if you're writing any kind of horror whatsoever, one technique that you want to do is try to not show the monster as long as you can avoid doing so, because that builds dread. Now, dread is a bit different from horror. Dread is anticipating the horror happening. And that's almost worse because the thing that humans fear the most, more often than not, is the unknown. And so the thing that your audience is imagining is going to be on the other side of the door is probably going to be worse than whatever your special effects team can put on the other side of that door. And so by having Will run, A, that's a perfectly rational thing to do, but also B, we're finding a way to not show the monster, which is its own kind of cliffhanger. We're building suspense. Like, the audience wants to know what's on the other side of the door, but Will's trying to get out of there, and so it kind of draws out this process, and we're left wondering, what could this be? So it's building this mystery. Do you have anything to add to that?
I guess like how mundane, something that I really like about Stranger Things is that most of the settings are quite mundane, right? Like you're in a house in a small town, and there's like still things that they're able to use to kind of create, like you said, that dread, but it's also a relatable dread, which I think is like a different level of like horror, right? Like you're in your house trying to call for help, or, you see like the chain that's holding the, door locked or whatever, moving. Like these are things that somebody could look over and see on their, actual door or something like that. So, I just think that's also another part of it, making like really relatable things part of this dread.
Yeah, well put. Well put. Let's get back to Will and see what he does. Exterior, buyer's house, night. Whoom. Will explodes out the back screen door. He sprints into an old wooden shed and, interior shed moments later, wham! He slams the shed door behind him, breathing hard. His eyes dart, searching for something. The shed is cluttered and dark, lit only by a naked light bulb hanging from the ceiling. The bulb buzzes, flickers. At last he spots it, an old Remington rifle, dusty, hanging on a wall mount. I just want to talk about some scene dressing here. So we have the naked light bulb here. It's flickering. And so the fact that it's flickering actually does a couple of things. One, it's kind of creepy and it showcases that there might be something supernatural going on because it's sort of flickering in response to whatever this thing is on, like, that's chasing Will. But also by changing the lighting in the scene, you're also creating this like uncertainty, and you're also creating a situation where, like, if it becomes darker it might be harder to see, and you're also creating an environment where the monster might be harder to see. And so you have him going for his gun, or for this gun rather. Will yanks it down, retrieves a few ammo shells from a workbench, and loads the rifle as fast as he can, which isn't very fast at all. He is so scared, his hands sweat and shake. Thud, thud, thud. Heavy footsteps echo, then guttural noises. Will looks back to the shed doors. They shudder and moan. And then slowly, ever slowly, they begin to yawn open. So again, like, we're really teasing this out. We're really like delaying showing off this monster, which is kind of in the spirit of a cliffhanger. Like, you really want to try to draw things out, milk them for all they're worth, and you don't want to show your monster if you can absolutely help it, especially in the pilot episode of like a horror show. So let's see how they treat this. Will finishes loading the rifle. He snaps the chamber shut and aims it at the door. The rifle trembles in his hands. The shed doors slowly yawn open the rest of the way. It, whatever it is, enters the shed. We still do not show it in full, but we catch glimpses of it in the flickering light, misshapen, withered, pale, slick. So again, the screenplay goes out of its way to be perfectly explicit that they have no interest in showing the full monster. To advertise the fact that they do know how to write horror. They know that showing the monster right away is never a good idea.
I also thought of one thing about how they're also kind of like adding to this dread, or like this heightened sense of like danger, in how they're also setting up kind of like in the set dressing, because he goes from like this very large house, right, where it's an everyday sort of thing, and then things start getting creepy. He starts feeling unsafe, and then he bolts, and now he's in a smaller enclosure, which is like a shed. There's even less light, you know, he's like looking for something. It just kind of gave me the visual of like he's more confined. He has like maybe less to his disposal because it's like not a house full of stuff. It's like, I don't know, a shed with random things, you know, that he's like struggling to even get to and find. So I think subconsciously, even for me as a viewer, it's like that's adding to some of this dread and like having it be much creepier too. He's like more and more vulnerable in the setting as well.
Another thing we should probably talk about that ties in perfectly with that is stakes, because like just not telling the end of something can be a little, it could pique curiosity, but it doesn't necessarily pique bingeability. However, if you tie curiosity with stakes as what's going to happen next, is someone going to live or die, that creates a need to know what happens next. And so we have every reason to suspect that Will might, bite the dust here from whatever is chasing him. So we intensely need to know what happens. So let's find out what happens. Will doesn't fire. He just stares, paralyzed by fear. The hairs on his arms stand up straight. His ears begin to drip blood, and then his nose. He fights tears.
Please?
A high-pitched shrieking sound suddenly fills the shed. We don't see what happens to Will. We just watch that naked, dangling light bulb. It glows brighter and brighter and brighter, filling the shed with overwhelming white light. We think the glass of the bulb is going to shatter, but then the terrible shrieking sound abruptly stops. The bulb dims, returning to normal wattage. We pull away from the light. The shed is empty. Will has vanished. End Act 1. All right, so yeah, that is the proper way to end an act. So, like, we think that Will is going to perhaps perish at the hands of whatever this is, but something even more mysterious happens, which is they both vanish. And the name of the pilot episode of Stranger Things is actually The Vanishing of Will Byers. So we knew before we clicked on the episode like that this was going to happen, but even still, we're kind of setting up like, oh, this vanishing has happened at the hands of this supernatural force that we don't understand. What does the vanishing mean? Is he going to be alive after he vanishes? We still don't know. So this plot thread of whether Will is going to still be okay is still left unresolved. Not only in this scene, which propels us into the rest of the plot, but also it still remains unresolved at the end during the cliffhanger of the full episode. And so that's the next scene that I would kind of like to jump to. So to orient our audience here, I'll still be the narrator. Jackie will be reading for Joyce, who is Will's mom. She's spent the episode realizing that her son has disappeared and trying to track him down more so than anybody else, and she's been almost slowly unraveling, desperate to find out what happened to her son. So we pick up toward the end of the episode where she is grabbing a phone similar to how Will did when he called 911. So here we go. Moments later, kitchen. Joyce grabs up the phone, her voice tense, strained.
Yes? Hello?
There is no answer, but she can hear the sound of low breathing on the other end.
Lonnie? Hopper?
Still no answer.
Who is this?
Jonathan stands up, getting worried now. The sound of breathing grows louder.
Who is this? Answer me.
At last we hear a voice. It sounds very far away. It is the voice of a boy.
Mom?
Joyce pales. Tears rush to her eyes.
Will?
Jonathan races over to his mom.
Where are you, baby? Talk to me. Will?
But Will's voice is now gone, and in its place, another voice, guttural, inhuman, shifting in pitch.
Who is this? What have you done with my baby? What have you done?
Silence. Then, a high-pitched shriek erupts from the receiver. Probably going to stop there. That was actually really hard to cut in the middle of.
Yeah.
very good at building suspense. So I want to call attention to a couple things. This does a great job of calling back to when Will picked up the phone and heard weird noises before. And so this kind of teases the fact that like this phone is somehow being used to communicate between this supernatural creature and Will's house, I guess. And so we also learn, we don't get full confirmation actually, because it just says a boy. But we kind of get this hint that Will is in fact alive still. But it's not full resolution, so there's still some unease that we have as viewers. Like we need to know that like it's full confirmation. And at the very least, Joyce believes that it's Will, but she's kind of at the point where she's willing to believe anything if it means that her son might still be alive. So hard to treat her as a reliable narrator when it comes to her son. And you know, we're not getting the answers to the questions that we have. And that is fully the nature of what a cliffhanger is. Like you raise a whole bunch of questions, but the answers that you provide are either not satisfactory or they're just not even there. And that, you know, kind of raises these questions in our mind. What happened to Will? Like, how is Joyce going to get him back? Is she going to get him back?
I was just going to say also, like, I think you kind of hinted at it towards the end that, like, these questions that you're raising, not only are you not like answering them, but you're sometimes giving enough information to, like you said, create more questions and have us like wonder even more. So it kind of deepens that.
Yeah, well put. This scene goes on, but not much more. Instead, we're going to cut somewhere else. So to orient our listeners here, another part of Stranger Things, perhaps the easiest part to remember, is that Will is a part of a group of friends, and their D&D group, they get together, and his friends know that Will is missing, and they're out on their bikes looking for him. And so that has also been a subplot that has been building throughout this pilot. It's been following the friends and how they're reacting to this. Simultaneously, there was yet another subplot featuring Eleven, who, as I'm sure you know by now, is this girl who escaped from a facility. She has psychic powers, but she doesn't really talk. In all of the scenes that have been, at least in this version of the pilot, she hasn't said anything, and so there's a lot of mystery behind what her entire deal is. And I believe in the way that Stranger Things got filmed, I forget if we see her break out first, but at least in this version of the pilot, she just shows up somewhere unannounced, and in a hospital gown. We don't know who she is. We've never seen her before. So like there's lots of mystery surrounding who this person is. We don't know her motives. We don't know anything about her really. And so we're going to see something happen here. So I'll continue being the narrator. I will voice Mike. I'll also do Dustin, and Jackie will do Lucas. And we'll read through a scene that appears shortly after the scene we just read. Exterior, Mirkwood, later. Whoosh. Our boys bike onto Mirkwood. They scan the trees, calling out, Will? Will?
Will?
I've got your uncanny 269. There's no response but the chirp of cicadas. They bike on in silence for a little while. Lucas grows impatient.
Why are we even here? My mom says there's a whole search party.
But they don't know Will, and he doesn't know them. He knows us.
So? So
what if he's scared and... A shadowed figure suddenly appears in the middle of the road, racing across the pavement, racing right for our boys. Going to pause right here. So at this point, we have every reason to believe that this figure is the same figure that tracked down Will. And so we're anticipating that these boys at this point are also going to vanish, and they're going to share the same fate as Will. Because again, you know, as talented horror directors, they are not showing us, they are withholding information to let our minds imagine the worst. Which again is great in terms of how to engineer a cliffhanger. You have to create these situations where it could resolve in any different number of ways, and the more uncertain something is, the more people will think about the different ways that like it could possibly resolve. So, okay, we have this shadowy figure. Mike's eyes shoot wide. He spins the wheel to the left. Too fast. He loses control. Skids. Dustin and Lucas crash into him. They all tumble and, whoom, slam into pavement. They roll to stop. Dirt coughs.
What? What was that? Mike?
Mike doesn't respond. Instead, he climbs to his feet, turns around, and looks back at the darkened road behind him. The shadowed figure is standing there, staring right at him. Mike is wide-eyed, scared. Slowly, very slowly, he raises his flashlight and aims it at the figure. The beam illuminates a young girl. Bald head, wide eyes, fish and fry t-shirt. 11. Quick pause. I seriously forget the name of whatever the restaurant, the name of the greasy spoon that she shows up to in the actual pilot, but in this version it's called fish and fry, so that's what that's supposed to mean. Let's just finish out the scene here. She looks at Mike. He looks at her. Their gaze holds a beat, and then a low growl rumbles. Mike hears it. He looks up at the night sky. So this is where this part, like, we don't see any more of 11 or the boys in the rest of this episode. And this still counts as a cliffhanger, and I'll tell you why. Because for the entire episode, we've been following the boys, and we've been following 11. This is the first time that they've met up. We don't know what 11's deal is at all because she hasn't spoken a word. And this is where they kind of end. And so this is a cliffhanger. We don't know how they're going to treat each other. It's a complete mystery as to what's going to happen when these two plot lines intersect. And that is a type of cliffhanger that's being used right here. It's not the kind that's necessarily attached with stakes, though I think we have seen 11 kind of do some light property damage with her telekinetic powers, so she is fully capable of messing up these boys if she wants to. So yeah, this is kind of like a wild card sort of situation.
I would say that maybe there is a little bit of an element of stakes because you do hear that growl, and so it's unclear if, like you said, these boys were going to meet the same fate, or maybe even 11. Like, are all children in the story like being hunted or something?
Really quick, the growl is supposed to be thunder. And there's actually a subplot in this version of the pilot where there's actually this storm rolling in, and it's one of the first things you see in the pilot, and it's also one of the last things you see in the pilot. So it kind of bookends this thing where not only are these plot lines intersecting right here at the end of the pilot, but there's also this storm that's rolling in that is its own wild card. It's a literal force of nature. I don't believe that was sort of filmed because Montauk is based on a real town in Long Island by the same name. It's a coastal town. And so like a big storm there could be like a hurricane, could be something that's really big. Like, I think that this subplot kind of got abandoned, but, let's just read the rest of the script just to see where that subplot goes. Interior buyer's house, night. Joyce and Jonathan hear it too. They look out the window with tear-stained eyes. Exterior woods, night. Hopper's radio crackles to life. You hear that, Chief? Hopper doesn't respond. His eyes fixed on the sky. We follow his gaze, rising up over his head, and up over Camp Hero Base, and up over the shadowed trees, and up to the dark silhouetted clouds in the sky above. A low growl rumbles, just like in the opening scene. But this time, it grows louder and louder, shaking our eardrums. An electric blue light flashes behind the clouds. The storm is no longer coming. It's here. End of episode. So this does a couple of things. So one, the storm is itself tied with stakes, but also it could serve as a metaphor for this uncontrollable force that mirrors the uncontrollable supernatural force that has been sort of plaguing this city, where it kind of has this sort of oncoming impending doom that you can do nothing to stop. And so it does a great job of setting the scene for how we are supposed to feel emotionally about the rest of what's been happening. And it does a great job of setting the tone emotionally. And again, there are a lot of these plot threads that kind of look at this. So there is the boys in 11, like they hear the thunder. There's Joyce and her son Jonathan, they hear the thunder. And then we have Hopper with whatever officers he's with, they hear it. And so you kind of get the sense that everybody in this town is going to be treated the same way by the storm. They're all at its mercy, and similarly, they're all going to be at the same mercy of this unstoppable supernatural creature as well. And that's kind of like the metaphorical tone that this storm is supposed to imply. And so this is a great job of kind of doing an emotional cliffhanger where there's like this impending unease, and you're supposed to be like, oh yeah, we don't know what's going to happen, so we have to watch episode 2 to find out. And again, that's the purpose of a cliffhanger. Like, you need something at the end of episode 1 to make you click on episode 2 in order to show that your series is not just like this thing that can be wrapped up in a bow in just one episode. The whole point of long form storytelling is it's long in its form, and that, like, you know, these stories take time to tell. And if you don't have cliffhangers stringing you along from one episode to the next, then your audience will sort of lose interest, potentially. And yeah, like that's why we call this podcast Binge-Worthy, because that is the nature of serialized storytelling. There always has to be something to get you to click on to the next episode, because that's kind of how to maintain interest in long-form stories.
For sure. And I think also I really did like the metaphor. I thought that was pretty clever. And as a viewer, it also kind of feels like being at the top of a roller coaster where you're kind of like, you know, bracing for what's coming next, and that things are probably going to get a little bit worse before they get better, but it's going to be like maybe an interesting ride because there's a lot of questions, right? Like there's a lot of different elements. So yeah, I think the cliffhanger also kind of accomplishes that.
Yeah, well put. Well put. So let's go over our takeaways real quick. So takeaways, you want to try to string things along as possible. You want to ask more questions than you give answers. You want your answers to be kind of not really all that satisfying. You want to control the release of information. If you're writing horror, you definitely don't want to show your monster in the pilot. Like, that's, if you break that rule, you need to have some very, very good reasons for breaking that rule. I have not seen that rule broken well, but that could just be me.
Hey, Future Jonathan here with a bit of context on this genre trope. Not showing the monster in the pilot episode is true for serialized horror stories like Stranger Things. However, if you have a Monster of the Week format that is different from episode to episode, things like Supernatural, Gravity Falls, or The X-Files, where you're fighting a different monster every week, then yes, you would show the monster in the pilot episode. That is a big exception to the rule that I'm quoting here. These comments were more or less for serialized stories like Stranger Things or Midnight Mass or any sort of long-form stories with the same monster. All right, back to the podcast.
And you want to make sure to attach stakes to these cliffhangers. Someone's life has to be in jeopardy. If you can create some kind of an emotional sort of cliffhanger where there's a very good metaphor, like at the end with this oncoming storm, like that is just icing on the cake. That is really good. And also another way that you can generate cliffhangers, although this is a bit of a softer way of doing so, is by having two plot lines intersect, kind of like how the boys in 11 met at the end for the first time. We don't know how that's going to resolve at all. We have to watch episode 2 to find that out. That's not enough to kind of, end the episode on, which is why there was a little bit more at the end, but it is a way of piquing interest. All right. So with that in mind, why don't you take us out?
We hope these discussions can help writers of all walks to help diversify the media landscape even more.
And let us know on socials if there are any shows or series you'd like us to break down in a future episode. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Jackie.
Thank you for tuning in, and take care and stay safe.
Bye.